We're now going to shift into our medical tourism section, starting with Marc Joffe, who's been interested in these seasteading ideas since before there was a Seasteading Institute or the term seasteading for what, 20 years now maybe? Yep. And he's going to talk about medical tourism. Please welcome him.
So at the 2009 conference, which is when I first really hooked in with seasteading, got really motivated by it, a lot of the focus was on medical tourism opportunities on seasteads. And we haven't seen anything yet. So Randy asked me to work with a couple of other seasteaders and just start brainstorming about ideas that might really stimulate you all here at the conference to think about how we can really commercialize this really, really exciting opportunity. So we kicked around some ideas, and I'm going to show them to you, and we even have a fairly baked business plan to end this thing off with. So in the 2009 conference, a lot of the focus was on the idea of cruising. So the idea would be that you get a bunch of patients, you go on a cruise ship, you have your the patients have their procedures, then you have a very nice recovery while you're sitting by the pool drinking martinis. So that's really been a lot of the focus over the last couple of years. There is an alternative, and that alternative is really stimulated by what we've been seeing with Blue Seed. The idea of a stationary medical facility to which patients and providers would ferry back and forth. I find that to be personally a very compelling opportunity because you can really service a lot more patients. There's a certain budget required with cruising, and there's a certain capacity limitation. So if you have a very large vessel like the type that the Seasteading Institute just got and contribution that we learned about yesterday, that could really serve a lot of patients if it's there every day, 12 or 24 miles off of a port. So I think that's a very compelling opportunity, and one that I'm hoping you all can sort of tie into as well. It's much more practical for follow-up care. So it's not a one-time and you're done type of thing. The boat's always there, and if you're in the metropolitan area that's near that facility, you can take advantage of going back and having repeated visits. Also, to the point of why this is a movement and not just a bunch of people talking about business. We want to see social change. So to me, having a permanent or semi-permanent vessel constantly providing these treatments is a lot more attractive than just having a variant on the cruise ship industry. So I'm really excited about the idea of a stationary med stay. In terms of the scalability limitations, one thing that we really have to focus on is third-party payment. So in the U.S., we have right now a large number of people who are not covered by any kind of insurance. But if Obamacare is allowed to stand, pretty much 95, 96% of people are going to be covered by insurance. So it's going to be very hard for a medical tourism type of business, including a seasteading medical tourism type of business, to compete in the fee-for-service space because there's just not going to be that much fee-for-service. So we really have to watch, and as we plan these kinds of things, what happens with Obamacare. It does look like the Supreme Court may throw it out, and that will continue to create an opportunity around uninsured people. The other really big opportunity that we should be looking at, though, is even in the insured space, if we can convince insurance providers to offer this as part of their HMO or PPO package, then we get a lot more people, and we can incent insurance providers to do that. If it's a lower cost, high quality alternative to terrestrial-based medical care, that's something that we can really very realistically accomplish. So I think that's something we really need to focus on, is the fact that not all of the revenue opportunities are from standard fee-for-service patients. So I've been pursuing one angle of this, which is the idea of exploiting Cuba as part of the idea for a medical tourism-based seastead. Now, I got the idea when I saw Michael Moore's movie Sicko, and you might remember that in that movie he actually showed people not being able to get medical care in the U.S. So he flew them down to Cuba, and voila, they went to a hospital in Havana and they got treatment. So my wife and I got so excited about that idea that we actually went down to Cuba. And my wife is fortunately a great Spanish speaker, so she was able to translate for me everything that was going on, since my 5 years of Spanish ended about 30 years ago and I forgot everything that I learned. So we wanted to see, is this for real? Now, the first thing that our tour guide told us was, actually the Michael Moore thing didn't work, because the medical tourists that he brought would not have been allowed to bring enough money to cover the treatment, number one. And number two, Cuba does not provide medical tourism services for free. So it was interesting to me that the guide was honest enough to point out that this was not actually the truth. Now, the other big controversy about Michael Moore's point is, he makes the point that the life expectancy in Cuba, according to WHO statistics, is very close to the life expectancy in the United States. And I think a lot of us who are pro-free market people, it's like, oh, that just can't be true. They must be lying. So it's sort of interesting to get on the ground and check it out yourself. As I say in the slide, doctors in Cuba are extremely low paid. We met with a minister of health, and somebody actually asked what a doctor's salary was, and he was very evasive. He said it varies. So then, interestingly, we had a chance to go to a synagogue. And in the synagogue, one of the people there just blurted out the number, and it's 20 Cuban convertible pesos, which is 23 US dollars. So they're incredibly low paid. They are well trained, and there are a lot of them. So just thought I'd show you the obligatory old car picture from Havana. I mean, anyone who has ever seen a picture of Havana, you always have to see the old car from the 1950s. And for those of you who don't know, probably most of you do, there's been an embargo against Cuba since Castro took over in 1959. And so pretty much a lot of things have just frozen in time from 1959, and certainly the cars are one of them. And they have an incredible industry of people who just fix cars. So that was an amazing thing. When you think about it, this car is like 60 years old, and it looks like it's in pretty good condition. So our tour was arranged by an organization called Global Exchange, which is a not-for-profit that does reality tourism. And they take you to a lot of unusual kind of destinations, and they have great relations with the Cuban government. So we were able to see quite a bit of the medical facilities or medical industry in Cuba that an ordinary tourist might not be able to consume. A lot of the care is provided in something called polyclinics. So these are neighborhood health facilities that provide multiple services, and people go to them very, very frequently. Now, in terms of the technology, this is a picture taken in the polyclinic. You can see it looks like it's pretty primitive, and if anyone's interested, I have a lot more pictures of this on Dropbox, and I could share that Dropbox with you. But the facilities are really primitive. One of the things we learned is they don't have disposable syringes there yet. So all the glass syringes are just boiled, like they were here 60 or 70 years ago. So really primitive, but again, those health outcomes that WHO reported are real. They do have very high life expectancy, and it's basically because they flood the zone with practitioners. So you get seen a lot. You get seen every year. They walk around to your house if you haven't been seen, and they make sure that you're in the system. So not all the facilities were second rate. We were taken to a senior center, and I thought it was very impressive. The seniors seemed really engaged. They had a lot of activities for them. It was really very very nice to see. So it's definitely a mixed story. The technology is not there, but the human aspect of it is definitely very strong. Okay, so what's the implications potentially for seasteading? So Florida is, as you know, about 90 miles away from Cuba. And Florida, as you may not know, has the highest medical costs in the United States, as reported by the Dartmouth Atlas. Part of that is attributable to Medicare fraud. But part of it is just because I think there's a relative shortage of practitioners relative to the number of people needing treatments there. And of course, there are a lot of people in Florida who are not covered by Medicare. There are younger people, recent immigrants, who may be underserved and overpriced by the health system there, who might have who might take some benefit from this. So the proximity to doctors who are high quality, who are making $23 a month, to patients who are normally used to paying enormous amounts of money, seems like a very compelling opportunity. So how can we take advantage of this? Well, the suggestion is as follows. Basically, we put a medstead, stationary medstead, somewhere between Florida and Cuba. We ferry patients over from Florida. We ferry doctors over from Cuba. Now, what are the problems? Well, this clearly fails Max's political test, right? Because it's going to be very controversial, both in the United States and Cuba. Now, we actually met with some folks in Cuba in the medical tourism industry. I brought back with me a brochure that has lists of treatments that they provide there, along with information about a foreign or a medical company that's trying to commercialize opportunities with Cuba for overseas purposes. So there's a lot of interest in terms of, in Cuba, how can we monetize the investment that we've made in healthcare? And the reason for that is they're incredibly desperate for foreign exchange. Between the incompetence of the socialist system and the effects of the embargo, they just don't have a lot of money in Cuba, and the one thing that they have that's really attractive is their medical system. So I don't think the problem is so much on the Cuban end. I think the problem would be on the US end, and this would obviously, if it was attempted, would have to be done extremely carefully. Make sure that all the letter of the law is met, as well as trying to deal with some of the objections that people are going to have. But to me, I think that the Cuban embargo is something that's been there for over 50 years. The support for it is hollowing out, and I think this could be something that would really push it over. One other thing we found in Cuba was not only do they have a lot of doctors, but they also have a lot of treatments that are not available in the US. And one of the treatments that they really pushed very hard, that seemed very impressive, was Pro-B. This is a treatment for diabetic foot ulcers, and everyone in this room seems to be pretty healthy and probably doesn't have to deal with type 2 diabetes. But as you know, in America, we have an enormous problem with obesity, and there's a lot of type 2 diabetes. And as we found out from some of our colleagues on the trip, there are an enormous number of people who've got problems with diabetic foot ulcers. And so because of the poor bilateral relations, no one's really working to put this through FDA approval. So it would really be nice to take advantage of the seasteading opportunity to provide this kind of treatment on a medical seastead. Now there are limitations. This is a treatment that's provided usually over the course of 1 to 2 months. It's provided 3 times a week. And you have a patient that's not that mobile. So the ferrying of patients back and forth, that's definitely a logistical issue that may or may not be overcome. And for those of you who are interested in learning more about this particular treatment, there's a YouTube video about it, and I have the link there. Again, if you want more information, if you want to see anything I have like this or these links, just check with me later and I can give you a copy of the slides. Okay, so we talked about Cuban physicians as sort of an extreme example of being able to take advantage of a cost arbitrage by using foreign physicians who are used to receiving a lot lower compensation and then putting them in front of American patients who are used to, at least indirectly, paying very high medical fees. One of the members of our group actually sort of objected to this whole cost arbitrage argument. He said, there are a lot of American practitioners who would probably be interested in this. And because he's a physician, his name is Ted Levy, he is able to join a site called CERMO, which is a doctors-only forum. And he actually posed the question of, would you be willing to practice on a medical seastead? And what would be some of your concerns and what would be some of your suggestions about kinds of treatment? And this one forum post got 50 responses, which I think is really, really strong for a forum post. Normally, especially on a medium that only has 1,000 to 2,000 active users. So I think that shows that there's a lot of potential interest among U.S. doctors, in practicing on this kind of facility. So, what were some of the advantages that doctors saw? Well, clearly, there's less paperwork, right? There's right now, physicians are being really confronted with more and more complex paperwork as they try to get reimbursement for Medicaid, Medicare, third-party insurance, and whatever. There are all these different systems. They're not compatible. A lot of people have just sort of dropped out and gone totally fee-for-service. So the whole paperwork thing, people don't like it. Really would rather have an easier way of working. The ability to use lower-cost medicines and medical devices. I mean, for anyone who's been to Mexico recently, it's amazing. It's like a supermarket of low-cost, Viagra and Cialis and all those other kinds of things. So clearly, there's a lot of benefits to being outside of the pharmaceutical cost structure that's in the United States. And then obviously, one thing that really bothers doctors is malpractice insurance. And it's very important in a medical seastead situation. We can't just say it's buyer beware. That again, as Dario and Max pointed out, reputational issues are really important. We've done a lot of work in thinking about arbitration type of solutions where the patient is still protected, but there are limitations to what the liability is. And I think it's very important, before something like this is structured, that be made known to everybody who might be interested in participating in care, and also the wider community, so people don't argue that this is somehow a way of exploiting patients. So, U.S. physicians may be willing to work for less money to capture these benefits of not having to worry about malpractice insurance, less paperwork, and lower cost medicines. So then we asked, what kind of treatments might you want to have on this this facility? And some of them were interesting. Probably some of them are familiar to you if you've been following medical tourism, but maybe some of them aren't. Executive annual physicals. This is actually in the Cuba documentation I had. This is one of the services that's offered for about $500. And this is not just going to your doctor and having them hit your knee with a hammer and seeing whether you have a reaction. This is a really, really detailed workup where all sorts of tests are conducted, long consultations, and so forth. And this has become very popular with senior people at corporations. A lot of corporations now build that into their benefit packages. So executive physicals are a big opportunity. Endoscopy and colonoscopy. I'm about to turn 50. Looking forward to that. Unfortunately, it'll be too early for me to do a colonoscopy on a seastead, but perhaps you younger people can benefit. Hip and knee replacements. That's one we've talked about a lot. In the seasteading movement. Tying up your stomach so that your food intake is diverted. That's also been a major area of discussion. One that was new to me was psychotherapy, and especially group therapy, like having a cruise for a weekend to do group therapy. So what's really attractive to me about that is there's no equipment. It's a really, really low-cost thing that could be done on an experimental basis, and it seems like having a cruise and getting some group therapy, that might be an attractive option for some people. And then offshore teleradiology. So Ted is a radiologist, and one of the points he made is that in radiology, you get certified by state, right? So you could, if you're, say, certified in California, you can't necessarily read scans from people in Oregon or Washington or Nevada. But if you're a few miles offshore, and if you remember in the legal conversation yesterday, we talked about how the laws of California might only go for 3 miles or perhaps 12 miles in certain cases, then it's very possible that the scan from your MRI could be transmitted to an American physician offshore who's licensed in only a single state, but he would then be able to read the scan from any state in the country. So I think that's a very exciting opportunity because it really doesn't require even the patient to go offshore. The patient could be in Montana, but the chart is read offshore in the seastead. Okay, so some other thoughts about from these physicians about what we should be doing in terms of an offshore medical facility. One is telemedicine component. So right now there's really an increasing technology opportunity to do tests and then transmit the results of those tests electronically. So you can have a blood workup. You can connect that to a scanner that's connected to a computer and have that sent over the internet to a physician. So clearly in terms of a stationary seastead where you're constantly following up with patients, you may want to try to reduce the number of ferry trips by having some of this diagnosis done via phone and with results coming in electronically. And that also helps with the idea of having electronic health records, which has been a big deal in the Obamacare discussion, is if patients have better records kept over a longer period of time, duplicate procedures become less likely. One doctor suggested that it's really important to have gaming on the Seastead, and I guess that's a good idea because, as you know, most older people are big consumers of the health system, and they also like gaming, so that might be a good good opportunity there. The point was made that a helipad would be needed for emergencies, and this was an interesting one. Now, I'm not an engineer, so I just copied this, but the people in this room who are engineers, a lot of whom presented yesterday, you can tell me whether this makes any sense, but the idea was that even though the ship might itself be unstable, you could do things to make an operating theater on the ship stable through gimbals and other kinds of equipment. So be really interested in hearing feedback about that idea. Okay, so one of our participants in our group, John Kosanke, is a very innovative seasteading supporter who actively participates in the forums and who couldn't be with us today. He's actually taken a lot of our discussions and thought about, hey, let's actually put together a business plan. So he handed me a business plan. I've got it. You can get it from me after I speak, and we can discuss it. But he's actually put together a business plan, and I think it's very exciting because he's pursuing a couple of opportunities and doing it in a fairly low-cost way. So one is the medical cruise idea, which has been the popular one. He got some of the IP from Surge Cruise, which was developed after the last Seasteading Conference. And he's proposed an idea around franchising, which I'll detail in a minute. And then second, we talked about Sealand yesterday, the fort that was sunk during World War II, 8 miles off of the British coast. And right now, that's really not very heavily used. It's basically there, I think, as a platform for supporting stamp and coin production. But we thought about a way of commercializing it, with medical tourism. So I'll give you some details on that. As far as the cruise services are concerned, the idea would be to rent space on existing ships and to develop expertise, and then once that expertise is there, to create a franchise operation so that other organizations could form and take advantage of the expertise while the parent organization receives franchising fees. So again, a very lightweight, low-cost way of getting started, and then a way of scaling up. And then in terms of the Sealand facility, now as you know, in Europe, pretty much everything is socialized medicine. So we get back to that problem I mentioned before with Obamacare. How are you going to get people to pay? Well, in Cuba, as I should have mentioned a little earlier, they have an enormous number of European patients and Canadian patients coming in for procedures. And why is that? Well, it's because they don't want to wait 2 years to have a procedure. So some people have got money, and they may not be able to source it, internally within their country, and they may be willing to go offshore to get a treatment. So, that's a very strong possibility in Europe, where everything is socialized medicine, but yet there's still unmet demand in terms of quality and timeliness. So the idea would be essentially to build up the fort that's there. Right now, basically you can't dock there. You basically have to use a rope to climb up to the top. So the idea would be to make improvements to this facility so it would be more convenient for patients and doctors to get to it. And then simply use the fact that some level of sovereignty and independence and autonomy has been granted to it, to use it as a platform to service European patients. Okay, so for more information about this, again, I have a business plan. Love to show it to you, love to discuss it. I think we need a lot more feedback to get this off the ground. And that pretty much covers my part of it. I'm going to turn it over now. We're going to do, 3 of us are going to present. We're going to do all 3 of us presenting, and then we'll take questions at the end. So I'm going to turn it over now to Peter Way, who's a medical student at Duke University Medical School. And he is also the president of the Business and Economics of Medicine Club. And he is also a Seasteading Institute intern working on medical tourism.